I'm Pete Alexander. For the people who don't know me, we're going to talk about dissecting the sky, looking at a bunch of pictures. And this group's, well, it's kind of big now. Holy guacamole. But anyway, if you have questions along the way, just put your hand up, ask, because it's kind of a little bit of an interactive thing. I by no means have all the answers, it's just kind of how I look at the sky and think of things. Um, so we'll talk about dissecting the sky, figuring out the lift lines, and kind of how I'd fly these things. All these pictures are mine, so it's from me flying. This is out of Minden this last year. That's Mono Lake. This is Eastern Sierra, and we're going to talk about this thing a little later. But we flew all the way down into here. It was a glorious day. So here's tell you about my background a little bit, really quickly, for the people who don't know me. Then we'll look at a lot of photos, talk about some soaring tips and tactics and some stories along the way. And then at the end of this, you go, man, I want more knowledge. So where do I go? I have some ideas for you. So that's me. It was my favorite glider when I was 15. That was only 5 years ago. But I learned to fly in sky sailing in Fremont, California, back in the day. So there's two big things. If you leave with two ideas out of me today, the first one, and this is the biggest one, is look outside. Look up, look out. There's nothing in your cockpit that's going to tell you where the lift is. It's going to tell you about the lift you had, but it's not going to tell you where the lift is. So you really want to be looking up and looking out. That's number one. So no more than 10 seconds at a time in the cockpit. You go, oh, I do that already. Most of us didn't, and I didn't a while back. And once I started spending no more than 10 seconds in the cockpit, there's a whole world out there you can see. You can see the whole climate change. But if you're staring at your computer, your Vario, it doesn't tell you anything about what's going on outside. This is Mifflin, so this isn't my picture. It's me in the front seat, but Rick Enderbo took this picture. And as always, look up and look out. You'll hear that a lot from me. The other thing to think about all the time is where's the wind blowing from, because that affects everything too. So those are two things. You don't leave anything else out of this talk. Look up and look out, and where's the wind blowing from, because it does change. So, of course, we all want a sky like this. We all know what to do with this. This is Uvalde during the Worlds. So, look up and look out. Wind direction, we've been talking a lot about that already. You want to look at the changing fabric of the cloud and how the cloud will do these little motion things. And where the little motion's going on is where the lift's at. And it's very subtle. Sometimes it's not, but in general, it's very subtle. The wispy bits, the little hangly, downly bits, when you see those moving, those are usually a good sign too. Shadows on the ground, which we'll talk about. Everybody knows about that. Are the clouds popping? Are the tops coming off? Because if they are coming off, that probably means you can get storms later. Maybe not. If they are coming off, you get to the right time. It's quite the fun ride. Until it's not. And then where is the sun? And then haze domes. You see this a lot in the desert west. You'll see little haze domes. Little baby. They're very hard to see. But if you're flying with polarized glasses, you can see the little subtle changes. And then hazy versus clean air. We'll talk about that a little more in a second. And then are there wrinkles? And wrinkles are always fun to add a whole new level of fun to your day. So what is a wrinkle? This is Mifflin again. You'll see a lot of times the winds will shift. It'll be very subtle, but that can make a huge difference where you find lift, especially underneath the cloud. As wind speed increased, do you have some wave over the top or something's changing? We always tend to think that the wind and the direction of the speed never change, but they do. And if you're not paying attention to that, that can make your life very interesting. Is there a big break on the cloud street? If you see a break on the cloud street, that usually means something's changed. A lot of times out in the west or even out here in the little hill country, if you see a break, it's usually because the wind's blowing through there a different direction or in a different way. Clouds spread out, my favorite. Things spread out and just screws up the day. Problematic cirrus, a front coming. And if you have cirrus coming, it means a front's coming, which you all know. But if you have cirrus coming, it's going to probably change your day. Could it shut it off? Could it make it weaker? Maybe it doesn't matter. But if there's cirrus coming, there's a change coming. If you have a mountain upwind of you, there's probably going to be some kind of wave influence. Maybe not good enough to make a wave, but definitely enough to screw up your day. Got rain. We all like rain. And then thunderstorms, got thunderstorms, got wave. And if you have wave going on above your head, and we'll talk about a few photos in a second, that could really influence how the thermals are going or not going. It could really suppress them. So we'll talk about wave. We're coming into wave season. First off, there's a classic wave out of Omarama, New Zealand. Lenny Stack, it's running this day it ran the whole distance of the whole island. So this is out of Reno, north of Minden. And what I want you guys to watch, it's about a 60-second clip. You'll see up here, you'll see little rotary bits. Down here, you'll see little rotary bits because the secondary is back here. This is the primary that's running the whole length of the Carson Valley. But also I want you to notice how all of this changed. The magic Lenny cloud changes through the day. And the point is that we always think of wave as being static and never changes, but it changes through the whole day. And you'll see it change from now. This goes all the way to sunset. Rotor coming and going. Rotor's still there, but the clouds aren't. Rotor coming and going, and the whole structure of the Lenny's changing. Doesn't move much, standing wave. But it does wiggle and jiggle a little bit, and how it wiggles and jiggles can tell you where the lift is or isn't. And this ran from late morning, and it goes way beyond sunset. And as the days are going on, there's less sun, less thermal activity. So you notice the rotors are going away, but they still see occasional little blips. And the wave, as the thermals go away for a while, it tends to get super silky, happy, smooth. So, but usually as the day goes on, you need to be up higher and higher as the wave dies, as the suns die down. So that was a raging wave out of Minden. Here, this is out of Omarama again. And the thing is, this is that island upwind of them. I think it's called Australia. And this is the smoke from the fires. And if you notice, there's wave over the top of this cumulus rotorish thing, but then it doesn't go very high. You don't have a ton of wind gradient going higher to keep the wave going higher. So it doesn't go very high, but it goes plenty high enough. And also, with this all jiggly, jaggly, broken stuff, it tends to say that things aren't quite normal for a thermal day. Usually have a nice flat bottom, so there's wave influence to it. But once we got to the leading edge of this, which notice it doesn't start up to quite a bit of ways out, we got up to about in here somewhere. But notice this gap. You have the ability yet to glide all the way out here to get into the lift. And that's usually true anytime there's wave over the top of a Q field, is that it's a little farther out here than you would think. Yeah, it was a fun day, except for the smoky thing from that island on the other side. Minden. So this is Minden in the middle here. That's Minden Airport right there. Reno's up here. Like when we're looking at the thing before, we're way up here. There's something super important about this thing besides what a beautiful wave day. There's a lot of clouds. Clouds are okay. But if you notice, as farther north you go, there's a little bit of a wave gap, a little bit of wave up here, little baby Lenny over the top. But if you notice, there's a ton of moisture here. And you got to be really careful when you have these days. And this happens a lot out west, and I'm pretty sure when you have wave here, it does similar stuff, where what makes the wave is the wind coming off the Sierra and doing its bounce. But what's driving the wind is a front coming. And so you'll get different amounts of moisture that'll puff in here. And what's happening this day, it looks pretty clear, but then, 20 minutes later, is all sucked in. You couldn't see Minden. And then it dried out a little bit, and it opened up again. And then about 20 minutes later, it all sucked in again. You want to make sure you have a place to go when it's doing this. Now, usually you want to go, I'll just go downwind, but we weren't getting high enough to go downwind because the wave wasn't good enough. So we had to go farther south to find a dry spot. So you want to be really, really careful that on any of these great wet wave days, you don't get yourself stuck on top or stuck in a cloud. You'll be very unhappy. All right, this is out of Williams, my home field. So a couple of things. First off, we got the wind. It's coming from right to left out of the west. On the right side of this picture, which you can't see super well, is there's a whole ridge line that's running north-south-ish, sort of. But also, you look at this, you go, is this really wave? Look at this cruddy, is that really a Lenny? Turns out that, yeah, it's a goofed up Lenny, but down under here we have these rotary bits. And over the top, we got more little wavy bits over the top, little Lennies. And you also notice that where the definition gets better, out here, what does that usually mean? Anybody? There you go, stronger lift, better lift. So the thing is that you might not have this great wave, but you'll have a good enough wave to keep slowly but surely working your way up. And the more definition of the cloud, the better the lift. This kind of goes for cumulus clouds, wave clouds, any kind of clouds. The more definition, the better the lift. Same wave, winds are left to right. But if you notice, it's all kind of raggedy. But believe it or not, this wave worked up to 18,000 feet this day. And you'd never necessarily think that because it doesn't have those classic pictures you see in the books all the time. And that's kind of one of the key things too, is that even though it's maybe not classic looking, it still could be plenty of lift. You know, same thing with thermals. And then all these places here, all these little raggedy bits, or all these little rotors, but unless you're looking outside, if you just looked really quick and looked away, you wouldn't see all these raggedy bits moving. And it's where the raggedy bits are moving is where the most action's going on usually. Not always. But again, it's not classic rotor around and around and all pretty. It's kind of just jumbled up raggedy bits. This is the same flight, but now if you notice, we're getting a little bit higher. And what do you notice about the wave? It's all getting organized now, right? It's all getting smoother, looking more refined. And that's because the wave is getting more in sync. This is about 15 minutes later compared to the earlier pictures you saw. Maybe 20, but it's slowly but surely getting better. And then again, is very subtle. And you're not going to see these subtle things if you're not looking outside, because these little barely you can see wispy bits were cycling in about a 1 minute cadence. They'd come up, you'd see them, then they'd go away. Come up and you see them, you'd go away. And this will tell you that, you know, the lift line's right about along here with the cursor. But you might decide, no, I want to go out here because you weren't paying attention to the little wispy bits. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's still rotor, just moisture. But what the moisture is telling you where you want to stuff your glider. And so what I did is I was kind of right on a line like this. But if you weren't paying attention, I tend to start upwind and move my way downwind. But if you're paying attention, you go, oh, this is the magic carpet where I want to be. Good question. Anybody else? Same day. Now on the lift really well. And now look at how smooth and happy it is. But there's a couple interesting bits. There's 3 interesting bits, actually. Notice this. What the heck is that? What the heck is this? Just a little bit of the wiggle and jiggle in the atmosphere. This whole thing worked all the way down to here and around the corner. Now, if you notice, there's a couple things to notice. What's going on here? There's all this filling. No, well, sort of. Somebody had part of it. What it is the valley quit. So that's into the valley. And what happened, there's a big pile of mountain right there. Not a big mountain, baby mountain. But the wave was still working up high, but not necessarily down low. You don't want to be down here, but up high, stayed right up high and around the corner. Got high, popped over, and came all the way back up here. Popped over, came back this way. This wave, if you notice, this Lenny looks pretty cool. It's not classic, but it's smooth, happy, polished. But look to this one here. And not so much, but it turned out the lift was okay. It was about half as good. Sir, in the back.
On your previous slide, when you got the little rotary bits,
yeah.
What's your best strategy for working with the tow pilot? Where do you be your best point to release?
Slightly upwind. A little bit upwind of the wispy bits. Upwind, always upwind. So I tend to always start upwind, then move downwind because it's easier. And, you know, if you're not sure, like let's say that you don't know where the wispy bits are, you haven't seen them, I tend to tow into here and then work my way downwind. I don't like to tow through the rotor anymore. I'm too old for that. But the other way to do is come from the downwind side and do this. But with how where we came from where I'm standing here and came that way. So either way, you could tow right here, and it's really fun, and then get off right there. Or we towed to about here or somewhere in here and got off in the back. So the question is, with this striation, this bumpiness, is that better than this smoothness? I tend to look at the smoothness as better because everything's more in flow. But I flew the whole length of this down, and I think the smoothie bits had better lift. But at the point, I was doing 100 knots. So there's a point once you got up, when you got into the happy zone, it didn't really hurt. Yeah, I think the polish says everything's in sync. But it doesn't mean there's not lift over here, because there was. This will be probably the stronger bit. Okay, convergence. How I look at convergence is two air masses smashing together. And it's what makes a lot of the lift on top of hills work these days. So here we have, this is out of Williams again, southwest of Williams in California. So everybody, I hope, notices there's clean air over here. There's dirty air over here. What does that tell us? We're doomed. Wind is that direction, dirty air, we all agree. So, but also notice that. So over the top, we have 90-degree winds. That's what's driving the clear air, right? You can't have clear unless wind's driving it. But down here, what the heck? The winds are 90 degrees to what the winds are doing above. So somewhere between that line and the clean air is where your lift is. And usually when you get air like this, it's kind of bulldozering the thermals. So it's usually deeper back than I want to ever go. But you know that it's going to be somewhere between here and the clean. And so you just slide down, make sure you get your tail directly into the wind and slide downwind. And as soon as you start feeling lift, start turning, and hopefully it's a thermal. If not, you're 90 degrees, you got the lift line, you can go start searching to find the climbs. And if you're looking outside a lot, you'll figure out which of these wispies have the most motion. You gotta be very careful to go, oh, there's a wispy, it's great. Well, if it's not moving, it's not a good wispy because there's no activity to it, there's no lift to it, or highly unlikely. No guarantees, it's soaring. Okay, this is out of Williams again. There's a couple super interesting things here. Anybody want to guess besides which the wind direction is? There's three interesting things. Yep, for one of them, we'll do it this one. So there's Lenny over the top. The wave's trying to work. I didn't get into the wave that day. Didn't try really either. And assume you're trying to go straight and bend around to the right. This is a different version of convergence where you got all this kind of grumpy air, but then you have a little shelfy to it. Shelfy, grumpy air. So this whole convergence line ran about 20 miles or so to the north. But the super interesting sides of convergence, the Lenny, is what do we see here where the green arrow is pointing? Yeah, what about the lake? Yeah, actually, you got it half right. Calm, not calm. Calm, not calm. So somewhere right in here, hey, wait, look. The clouds kind of line up to that too. Wait a minute. The convergence lines, you see this cloud here? The convergence lines slid out to the left a little bit. When you see a lake do that, dirty air, grumpy, chopped up, smooth the other side, the lift is there somewhere. It's just like the dirty, clean air thing we just talked about. It's very subtle, but it can make a huge difference, especially if you're low. Not saying you want to be over the lake low. I'm just saying that that's going to tell you how farther away from clouds you might need to be. Yep. So we got two different cloud heights. It's getting better as you're rolling around to the corner, and it gets back to the point being made. It gets higher out here. That was a fourth thing I forgot about. Sure glad you're paying attention, Michael. Oh yeah, the lean in the cloud too. Thank you, whoever said that. Thanks, I missed that one. There's a little bit of lean. Winds left to right. So as you can see out here, there's not a lot of lean in the clouds, but there's a little bit. And you know there's a little bit of wind, but not much because it's not blowing all the way across the lake. It's probably less than 10. All good stuff. Here's another example. So, of course, we ask you which way is the wind blowing, and it's all pushing this way. But again, it'll kind of show you how it's all grumpy and chopped up, and then as you get farther out here, it gets a little bit better. But then we got to look at the cloud shadows. Don't wait, there's more. I think that was the last one. The point being is, now the question is your lift line following this cloud shadow line, or is it back here? I don't know. This is, you went around the corner, and then as you got back here around the corner here, if you notice, the clouds get better again. But sometimes there won't be any really good lift in here. It'll be just good air to kind of bump along through, slow down through. And then as you got back around the corner, you got back to a connected cloud street. So part of the deal is trying to figure out where are these transitions where you need to slow down just a scooch to stay in the good air before you get pushing hard again. And this was one of those transitions about 10 miles before all the lift got better again. And as you come around the corner here, you see this, sometimes it's fine, but if you notice, this shelf isn't really clear shelfy. It's all kind of raggedy and but as you get to here, organization happens again. If you see where all the wind arrows are, all the cloud shadows and this whole mass was moving that direction. Not very quick, but it's moving that direction. So this air is coming off, there's a lake upwind of it called Clear Lake. So the other part is, when you look at wind and things are doing this, what's causing it? And usually it's either a gap in the hills or a lake or something. And you need to pay attention to that because lake air, water air is usually bad, and I think that's why this is all chopped up and unhappy. But as you got around here, you got away from the influence because the wind stopped. It stopped pushing this air mass. But what happens at a Williams where I fly is all day, the winds from the west build usually, and it pushes all the soaring farther east as the day goes on. This is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So just be aware of when you start seeing this, the wind's causing it. Why is it causing it? If it's all grumpy and jumbled up, probably not a lot of good lift to get around the corner. Probably got to do a little bit of gear shift. Yeah.
What did you learn from the clouds besides the wind direction when you were demonstrating those clouds? What did it tell you?
This told me that I expected it as I came around. So it's kind of, you came to this one, holy Moses, I saw the clouds and moved. I was pretty much expecting this to be garbage, and it was. And unfortunately, I didn't gear shift quick enough, and I got lower than snot right about there. Going, it'll get better as I went. And then I got back up when I got around the bend, back right in there somewhere. So it just says, when it's jumbled up, it usually says things are transitioning, things aren't right. I didn't stick my wing all the way in there, but I stuck my wing into it. Oh, it'll be convergence, it'll be fine, because it was fine for the last 20 minutes. That was way wrong. All right, thermaling tips. This is the Concordia out of Hobbs. We were chasing Concordia for about a thermal, then that was it. So the first one, the super easy version is, we all know, just stay in the lift. Piece of cake, right? How hard could that be? So you want to stay in the lift, duh. But when I've done some coaching lately, the thing is, instead of all these great gizmos in the glider, we have beautiful instruments now, is to try to get a mental picture of where the strong part of lift and weak part of lift is and move your glider there. And then you can start doing more refinement of things, but keep it simple. The other important thing is engage the thermal. Even if you're not exactly sure where the lift is, get a nice steep turn going and then decide what to do. Don't sit there lollygagging around. There's other people around because it just annoys people like me. Get in there, and even if you're wrong, get in a nice steep turn. The super important thing is constant speed and constant bank. Because if you don't have constant speed and constant bank, you're never going to be able to center the thermal because your turn keeps varying. It ain't going to work. So first thing is constant speed, constant bank, constant speed, constant bank, and then decide how to move. But until you do that, it doesn't matter. If you try to do 3 things at once, all 3 are going to suck. So start with speed and bank, and then move your glider. You probably, the tendency is everybody wants to make it perfect the first time. I'm going to make it fixed, and I'm going to move the glider perfectly as you move it into sync. So move it in small, easy bites. Control movements. You want them to be smooth, and there's 2 reasons for this in my mind. One, if they're smooth, you can feel the air. The thermal will tell you where the lift is if you let it. Two, if you're sitting there glad handing the glider, stirring butter, you're going to wear yourself out. And you're definitely going to wear me out if you're flying with me. So smooth and easy, constant speed, and make it flow like water. It's also less drag. Keep your scan up, inside, outside. Do not stare at the magic computer inside because it doesn't really tell you what's going on. It'll give you hints. Let it give you hints, but don't stare inside. And my classic thing is no more than 10 seconds inside the cockpit. Practice it. I thought I was really good. Then I flew with one of the UK coaches, and he said that's terrible because I was. He goes, it should be less than 10 seconds. You should not be looking in here. Get your head out of the cockpit. And that means you got to know how to fly the glider too. Okay, dancing with the gaggles. This picture's in Hobbs. If you look really close, it's hard to see from what it is. There's 12 gliders in that gaggle. Same rules, engage with the gaggle. It's kind of like getting into rush hour traffic. Don't sit out there on the edge. It's annoying as hell. Get in there or go away. And if you're not comfortable, find somebody to fly with the gaggles and do some practice. And again, you got a lot of people around. You got to make small incremental movements. Otherwise, you're going to maybe run into somebody. Hopefully not me. Keep your eyes out. Keep looking around. And one of the super key things is we all think we know where the best thermal is. We all think we know where you got to put the glider is. We are smarter than everybody else in the room. Sometimes you just got to fit in. Sometimes you just can't take your ideal place you want to be because there's too much traffic. So again, be a good citizen, fly together. Do not, racing across the gaggle or pushing somebody out. It's not cool and it's really dangerous. So, and if it's too crazy, sometimes you just leave. Hopefully not when you're low. Okay. One of the other key things is, I hear my buddy going up 10 knots and I'm only going up 1 knot. Oh, this sucks. Well, the weather you have is the weather you have. The soaring you have is the soaring you have. We all know what to do with this beautiful sky, beautiful flat bottom cues. This is New Mexico. But sometimes you're just a little bit on the back foot. You're just a little bit out of sequence. You got to fly the weather you got, not the weather you want. And you don't want to chase yourself into the ground because my buddy is out there doing 10 knots. I'm going to catch him as you go down below 1,000 feet and go, how did I get here? All right, the other big thing, and this kind of the idea of keeping your eyes outside of the cockpit, you want to keep your eyes wide open. You don't want to have tunnel vision like this, but you see that cloud, you go, holy guacamole. Here's everything I love in this cloud. It's flat, dark, little popper. So we know this cloud's going to be raging, we think. That's still about a minute away, but if you look to the right a little bit, oh, wait a minute, there's more cloud. Look to the left a little bit. There's a whole cloud. So if you just went straight, you're going to miss an opportunity maybe to bump through here and kind of do a zigzag to get to the good stuff and spend more time in lift. So eyes wide open to keep an eye on what's going outside, and also eyes wide open so that you don't run into somebody compared to you just going, I'm going to that cloud. It's my cloud. Nobody else is going to be here because it's mine. Then you find out there's 5 other dudes around, which is probably true because that cloud's really good. That was in Hobbs. Now, this is kind of a mountainish thing, but it probably applies out here too. What do we notice? We have this stuff called fog. This is out of Williams. This is in the hills due west of Williams. But it tells you a couple interesting things. One, this is fog. What do we know about fog? It's an inversion. There's no lift below the inversion. But then look at this. You got these little wispy bits. Sorry? Nope, it just thermal's trying to start up. Now, this is early in the morning. I forget what time it is. But the point is that the hilltops is where all the lift's going to be this day because there's going to be an inversion that never breaks. Fog went away later. But it also tells you that the day is good enough that eventually we're going to get some thermals later. But this is one of the key things about flying in mountains or little hills. Usually the hills on top will have better lift. Usually the hills would be above the inversion, whatever inversion's in the valley. And so there are days where the best lift will obviously be on top of the hills. It's higher and all that stuff. But there's also days where if you get off the top of the hills, you have this slow glide of shame. And because as you glide into the valley, all there is smooth airs like you're standing here. The 20-mile for us, it's a 20-mile glide of shame until you land off field. This picture is actually on top of Mount St. John's, which is about 25 miles northwest of Williams. This is the Sacramento Valley. Oh, the sun's behind me. It's behind here somewhere. This is early, or maybe, yeah, it's got to be early because the fog doesn't do that late. But the key on this one is stay on top of the hills. Don't fall off top of the hills. And that might mean taking weaker climbs to stay there. All right. And this is Nephi. So to put some of our big intelligence to work here, the wind's right to left. The clouds. Part of the deal is the changing fabric. Now, you can't see the fabric of the cloud change if you're not looking outside. And this isn't a great picture, but you can see there's a little bit of different stuff going on here. There's a little light spot, there's a little humpy spot, and there's a little wispy bit right there. So it is changing. And the thing is, if you saw it changing, I put my glider right there, and there's a nice, good climb. Somebody mentioned earlier is the wind and how the clouds all have a little bit of lean to the left, but not a hard lean. It's about a 15-knot lean. The other thing is cloud shapes. You got the lean. You got some really nice flatness here. Really nice flatness coming. And what else do we got out there? Yeah, I got showers. There's no thunderstorms because there's no vertical lift. It's just a nice, annoying shower, which got more annoying as we were flying into here. Back here a ways. This one here? Yeah, maybe. We'll give you a step. Yep, so the question is top of the clouds, well defined, is still going. And it's like, yeah, there's still flatness coming. There's actually a little bit of wispy bit there. There's maybe a little step. I can't see from my vantage point. We'll give you a step. But it's all nice and defined. Same thing with the next ones. Flat, nice and defined, nice and defined. But then you get into a little deeper here, like, what do you do with this? Do you go around to the right, upwind? Or do you go around to the left, downwind? Anybody? Right, upwind. You don't want to be downwind of the rain shower. Yeah, but which way is the cloud moving? Yeah, so the cloud's moving from right to left. And the reason why I don't want to be down here is it's downwind of the rain shower, cold air. It's also more in the shade. And if this doesn't work, I have more sun to choose from. It might be. This is the other thing is, so the question is, it already rained up here. Why are you going up here? Well, I don't want to be downwind in the downwind of the bad cold air. But if you could be right, hey, it's already been raining here, but you don't know, because you don't know if it just started raining, because I don't remember, or if it's gone through and got wet. My guess is if you see the rising dirt here, it probably started raining as it started to orographically lift up over the little mountain there. No, I don't have one. Sorry. You can, but I don't have one. I don't have one with me right now. Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball sometimes. Yes.
Go back one slide.
Yep, stand by one.
Those little mini cues that are on the upwind side to the right of the main cloud, a lot of times those work really well, especially late in the day.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. These little mini cues, what's going on with those? And again, if you're looking outside and you saw those little cues popping, again, you want to go to the new action, right? The new freshies. If there's new action going on, that's probably the best climb. And this is kind of a great example of eyes wide shut instead of eyes wide open, because we were all going, we're going to this one, which is probably good, but there's all this other stuff going on that I didn't mention, I didn't think about. So eyes wide open. Thanks, Jeff. Out of Minden, Eastern Sierra. So this is actually a good fabric cloud. We got shadows. Anybody want to guess which way the wind is? It's right to left. It's right to left. But if you notice the clouds, they're going kind of straight up. There's a little bit of a lean, a little bit. Not much down, a little bit. So there's a little bit of wind, but not a lot. You could also be watching the cloud shadows to see if they're coming off the Sierra or not. And they're creeping a little bit to the left, but very, very slowly. But now back to the fabric of the cloud. Look in here, a couple things going on. One, there's a little bit of a humper, a little bump there. There's also darkness. There's also lightness. And this is something you got to be watching the bottom of the cloud. You can't stare at it. If you stare at it, you're not going to see a change. But you kind of got to look at it, look away. Look at it, look away. And if you looked at it, it was actually humping really good about here. And then the same thing, you're looking at it, trying to decide where you're going to go next. I'm also trying to think of my next 2, 3, 4, 5 moves. And if you're thinking that way, as you're looking back and forth across the sky, you'll see the changes and where you want to put the glider. The idea is to hook it up to get on the magic carpet ride, where you just wander around underneath the bottom of the clouds, 500 to 1,000 feet below, by the way, because if you're too close, you cannot see the bottom of the clouds. You cannot see the changing fabric. You go, I'm up here, unless you can't see a thing. So I tend to be about 500 to 1,000 below the clouds and tend to stay that way so I can see the changing fabric where you want to go. Any questions about that, or did I miss something? We continued all the way down the Sierra, and this one all the way down into here somewhere before we jumped across to the whites.
So Pete, when you say humping, you mean the
Yeah, that's it.
doming underneath, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, this little dome. So there's two things here. Doming of the clouds. There's a little bit of doming, and also there's a little bit of fabric change going on, and there's also a color change going on, which I wasn't taking a video. I was flying 100 knots. So, but there's a change going on. And also Dick just pointed out, and this is the other thing I meant to talk about. Look at what's going on in Mono Lake. It's glass. So there's not much wind. So you kind of want to use all these things to tell you about the wind, the lakes, the cloud lean, shadow movement, your crab, all these things about what the wind's doing. So since there's not much wind down there, as we got to this cloud, it's really looking at, is it humping? How dark is it? Is there any fabric change? Is there a wispy bit change? Because there's really no wind to kind of tell you which side to go to. And there we go. All right, one more. This was 2 weeks ago. Cloud base was awesome. It was 14,000 feet out of Williams. But again, what do you notice about these cloud shapes? Yeah, that we've lost the definition we've had on previous slides, right? So it turns out that it's still working where the things are most defined. But if you notice, it's all kind of, the definition's not quite as crisp. It's a little more raggy. And this line of lift started over here a couple hours earlier, but has been pushed off by the wind. And you notice a lot of this broken, junky stuff. It turned out that this cloud here is coming right off that cloud shadow off this ridge here, which is St. John. So the main point of this slide is look how different it is, at 5 in the afternoon compared to the stuff we looked at from 2 in the afternoon. And then the question is, how high do you want to stay within the cloud base? And there's one. Yeah, I was pretty low, actually. Yeah, I was actually below 6,000 feet. And the hill up there is about 6,000 feet. So a general rule of thumb is about half the depth of the convection. Usually the thermals in the top half are the most organized. But ideally, as you can make that the top third, it's usually a little bit better. But you always can't do that. I try really hard to stay in the top third, and I try really hard to think about what is the lowest I want to go as I get lower to change my requirements for my thermal. Flying in the mountains, I try to arrive on the peak tops no lower than 500 feet off the dirt to give me some time to look around. Sometimes you have a day like this. Yeah, so this is out of Hobbs. Now, the first thing is, and this was told me by one of my mentors long ago, is just keep it in the air and something good will happen. And, I would much rather be floating around in zero sync lift than be sitting on the ground waiting for my crew. The other thing you see about here is like, oh crap, I'm in rain. So first thing is, with you're in rain, what do? Do you speed up? Do you slow down? Fly inverted? Any preference? Yeah, you want to get out of there. So you usually want to slow down a little bit if you can. But also there's happiness coming though. You can't give up yet. Because look at this. There's sun. As we got through this, the shadiness, there's sun, there's more sun. And then the idea is trying to pick your way. We actually picked our way, I think, to the right a little bit because the clouds look a little better than the left. It's kind of a coin flip. The problem is don't give up. Keep it in the sky. We slowed down, and we got to the other side of this muck and got to climb and went home. Best glide. We were about best glide plus 5 or 10 or something. Then we hit a bunch of sink, and then it's like, oh, what do we do? Speed up. Yeah, we got to speed up. No, we should slow down. And thankfully got out of it really quick. The other thing is, this is a Mono Lake on the east side. This is out of Minden again this year. Sierras, remember we were flying down the Sierras a little while ago. We're doing that. Now we've done a big U-turn and we're coming back up. So again, this is Mono Lake, beautiful thing, but it's very glassy. Not much wind, but there's just a little bit of a ripple here. Just a little bit. And that's probably about where this line of junk is. 17 something. I wasn't that high. Ground is 6 something or 7 something. It's very spooky going on the east side of Mono Lake. It looks like the moon. In about 15 miles is next good climb, which is, you can see the beginning of the clouds out here, but you can't see the rest of the ridge. But the key thing is you want to have a plan, because if you don't have a plan, you can't change it. And if you don't have a plan, you're not really sure what you're going to do. You want to use the gaggles, the other people around you. You don't want to be the gaggle. You need to be thinking for yourself about what you're willing to do, where you're willing to go. It's really easy to go, oh, I'll just fly Pete. It'll be glorious, until it's not. And you don't want to put yourself in that position. And as Dick Butler, one of the top pilots of the U.S., hope is not a strategy. I hope it's going to work. It ain't going to work. You need to have a plan. No plan, no happiness. Trust me on that one. Okay, you now heard all this stuff. You go, wow, I want more. This is Hobbs this year. So a couple things. One, I've given different flavors of this talk for the last 7 years. If you go to YouTube and if you search on Williams Soaring Center, there's 2 or 3 videos up there. Same thing, a little bit different. As everybody takes pictures. Then you can scrub back and do this in the middle of winter when you're bored. The other thing, if you haven't done it, is that Wings and Wheels has this great newsletter that happens from all these really smart people up here, maybe more. It's free. They talk about everything from the basics of soaring to more complicated things. But I really enjoy G. Dale, Garrett, Adam, all these guys have good stuff to say. And it's free. G. Dale's books, I had the pleasure of finding G quite a bit in New Zealand. If you haven't read his books, I highly recommend them, especially the top 3. They're all good. He's all self-published. He wrote them himself, all the illustrations by G. If you ever get a chance to fly a G or talk to G, buy him a beer someday. Where do you find them? Wings and Wheels has them, or in the U.S., and then this is G's website. So a couple final thoughts. If you're not having fun, you're probably doing it wrong. And there are days in the flight that really suck. But, overall, it's way better to be flying than sitting on the couch. And most likely, if you're having a difficulty, a challenge, probably others are too that day. It's probably not just you. Now, the depth of your challenge could be different, but most likely there's always some slow spots in the day. So if it's not going well, it's probably not going well for somebody else during the whole flight. One more thing. Tomorrow, 2:30, Saturday, you could come hear Sarah Arnold and Carl Striedick talk about how they did their thing in Uvalde to bring home the 2 golds. It's somewhere here. I don't know. It's here. 2:30. I know it's here at 2:30. I don't know which room. Sorry. I should have done that. All right, guys. That's all I got. Thanks a lot.